Thank you all for coming. I am Michelle Paul. I'm the Director of Resilience and Environmental Stewardship here with the city. And our department is helping the Emergency Management Department and the Department of Public Infrastructure to update our local hazard Can I start that again? This could take a while. Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Michelle Paul. I'm the Director of Resilience and Environmental Stewardship, and our department is helping the Emergency Management Department and the Department of Public Infrastructure to update our local multi-hazard mitigation plan. So I've just introduced myself, so this plan is important to the city because this will allow us to fund infrastructure projects that we need to remain resilient and sustainable from FEMA, federal funding from FEMA. So we're going to talk about the hazards and risks in New Bedford. We are going to talk about updating our hazard mitigation plan. We want to hear from all of you. And even if you're not at one of the ward meetings, you can take the survey. The QR code will come up later on. But we definitely want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And if there are small groups of people that would like us to give this presentation and to bring our maps to your group, please let us know. Just call the Environmental Stewardship Department. Our number is on the city webpage. And then we are going to do a gallery walk activity where we will look at the maps and discuss assets, vulnerabilities, and where we need to make sure that we maintain our infrastructure. Oops. So our climate is changing, and regardless of your opinion or your politics, we have seen the climate is changing. Our weather patterns are changing. And as that happens, we end up with increased periods of rain or increased frequency of higher precipitation, but we also end up with droughts because as the atmosphere heats, it can hold more water in the atmosphere, leading to heavier precipitation. But as our climate heats, it also pulls more moisture out of the ground. So even though we're getting heavy rains, it's very dry, and it ends up running off into our waterways rather than recharging our groundwater. So we're having to deal with things that we really didn't have to deal with before. We're having to manage our stormwater in different ways. We are seeing heat-related stresses. We are seeing vector-borne diseases, EEE, other kinds of diseases that mosquitoes can carry or ticks. And the ticks aren't dying off in the winter the way they used to, so it's now a 365-day problem. So we're seeing a lot of different trends, and pardon me if I read off of these because I have not memorized them. But in the recent past, we are at about 9 days a year above 90 degrees, and that is expected to nearly triple by 2050. Intense storms, we have a 55% increase in our total volume of rainfall during extreme events since 1950, and that is expected to increase up to an additional 48% by 2050. We have more than 8,000 homes that are within the FEMA flood hazard area, and we are going to increase the number of days with greater than a 1-inch rainfall up to 130% by the year 2050. And sea level rise, it took 36 years for sea level to increase 6 inches. It's going to take maybe another 15 years for it to increase another 6 inches. So what is resilience? It's the ability of our residents, businesses, and municipal operations to prepare, mitigate, adapt to, and endure shocks like extreme weather in our community. And at times, this is going to mean reducing chronic stressors. And what are chronic stressors? They're those financial stressors, health stressors like pre-existing conditions like asthma, environmental stresses like brownfield sites, and social stressors like folks that are shut in and can't really get out. So those are the day-to-day challenges that take a toll on our community and make the climate shocks even more dramatic and more stressful to us. And what are shocks? Those are the significant events that disrupt the day-to-day and requires action. It often amplifies chronic stressors. So flooding, if you are a shut-in and your area is flooded, that is obviously going to be a bigger problem to you than somebody who can easily relocate. Sea level rise, extreme heat. If you're asthmatic, that extreme heat is going to exacerbate your existing condition. Intense storms. So we have additional hazards and impacts that we need to be thinking about, and this plan gives us an opportunity to make sure that we document all of those so that we know how to address those hazards and make sure that our infrastructure and our systems are ready to handle those. So we can have disruptions in communications, in transportation, water and wastewater services, dam failure. That's a perfect example of why we need this plan. We need to understand how all of the dams within the city's jurisdiction are functioning, and we need to include those in the plan so that we can get federal funding to make sure that those dams are kept up and that we don't have any kind of failure. There are hazards that we really hadn't thought of before. 20 years ago, we didn't think about cybersecurity. Civil unrest, hazardous material release. When we think about sea level rise, where were a lot of the industries that operated 100 years ago? They were along the water. So we need to make sure that any hazardous material releases are cleaned up so that as sea level rise, that we don't end up with a re-release. And public health, again, who thought that we would have pandemics? And the air pollution from wildfires in Canada. So our solution is updating New Bedford's Hazard Mitigation Plan. Climate change and other hazards could negatively impact our bustling waterfront, historic downtown, and vibrant communities. As New Bedford looks ahead, mitigating and preparing for these hazards is critical to creating a more resilient future. And hazard mitigation planning enables communities to identify risks and vulnerabilities associated with hazards and develop long-term strategies for protecting people and property. So this planning process will result in an actionable plan update. We will come up with recommendations that we will come up with a system of following through on. We will strategically plan for getting federal funding and/or state funding and/or our operating budget to make sure that we are addressing those critical priorities in a timely fashion so that we will be more resilient to the impacts of climate. We will analyze the effectiveness of the existing policies, programs, and capabilities. What's working? What maybe is obsolete? What could we put on the back burner? And what really needs our attention? We want to provide the framework to chart our path forward to a resilient future and build capacity of community members to take action and raise awareness of impacts and solutions. There are certainly measures that every one of us can take, as well as the city. So we need to work together to make sure that we're all taking action. So our project timeline. We're assessing the hazards. That has been going on, and that started in January of this year, and we've been doing that through the summer. And now we are coming out to do community engagement to make sure that we're not missing anything. Even though there are multiple departments that are working on this and experts in many fields, we don't necessarily see everything every day. And the people who are expert in their community are the community members themselves. You all know what floods when, what's the first thing to flood, what's the, first thing to be blocked in a snow event, where are those trees that you worry about falling. We need to hear all of those things. And our action planning and final update, we are aiming to have that done, a draft done by the end of this year, so that by April of 24, we can submit that to FEMA for approval. So we want to make your voice heard. We want every voice to be heard. So again, if there are smaller groups, social groups, civic groups, community-based organization, church groups, where you think this presentation could be helpful and a discussion could be helpful, because we have maps here, we really want you to, write on these maps and tell us where the problem areas are and where are the assets in the community that we need to make sure stay in operation. So we do care about climate change. Surveys show that people are worried about climate change and worried about hazards, but we really don't talk about it. So that's what we're doing now. This is a very purposeful conversation to have. So what concerns you about shocks and stressors? How would you like to see New Bedford lead on preparing for those hazards? And what have you already done to reduce your impact or prepare for the impacts of hazards? There may be many of you that have already lived through climate stressors, maybe here, maybe in other locations, and we can learn from those experiences, so we really want you to share that with us. So we want you to stay engaged with and be resilient. On our dashboard, we have a tile that will send you to the All Hazard Mitigation information, this survey. Please take this survey. This QR code is up. Please, take it. It's available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. It won't take that long, and we really want to hear from you. So I'm going to leave that up there for a couple of minutes. We have had meetings in each of the wards because we know that each of the communities are very different. Today, we're on the peninsula. We're at Hazelwood Park. Very different from the north end, as are each of the neighborhoods very different. So, the hazards that are going to concern, people in some neighborhoods are not going to be the same ones that we hear about in other neighborhoods. So we wanted to make sure that we got to the entire city. So please, again, take this survey. All you have to do is go to nbresilient.com, click on the hazard tile, and it will also take you to that survey. And now we have a chance to get up, stretch our legs, and provide some input with our maps. So, can you help us identify those chronic stresses and climate shocks that you've experienced in the community or that you're concerned about? So we want you to mark the areas where climate shocks can lead to localized hazards on the map with colored dots. We've got a map just of Ward 6, and then we've got a citywide map. So you can use both or either. Then we want you to describe the incident or scenario and any impacts on a sticky note so you can give us more detail and place it on the map next to dots. If there are any Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers or any other language, please feel free to put your comments in the language that you prefer so that you can really express how you feel and what you are concerned about, and we will take on the responsibility of making sure that we translate that correctly so that we incorporate all of your feedback into the plan. And then mark on the map any existing institutions or assets, churches, community centers, any kind of social clubs where you usually gather, and maybe you gather in a storm event so that you could kind of be together. Maybe it's a family house. Identify those areas so that we know where people are going, and we can make sure that we are keeping those areas accessible, and we can, incorporate that into the plan. And the hazards of concern. We want to know what you're concerned about and what resources and support the city can offer. Put some sticky notes on the boards over here, and please share the hazards you're most concerned about in your daily life. Identify the resources and support that would be helpful for you to address, and identify effective communication channels for disseminating hazard information. With that, I'd like to thank you again for coming out. If anybody cannot make it to a ward meeting, please take that survey, take the QR code, or go to nbresilient.com. Take the survey because we really do want to hear from everyone. Thank you very much.